Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. In case you're just joining us, this is Daybreak, and we want you to be part of the broadcast at Citizen TV Kenya, at Safin_Ching, at Ayub Abdi Kadir. Share with us your thoughts and questions with regards to the conversation that we are just about to have right now, as we focus on the conversations revolving around the bipartisan talks planned to take place between the government and the opposition. It all started with the weekly protests in the country. We all saw what happened. And of course, that culminated to Sunday when President William Ruto sort of extended an olive branch to his political rival, Raila Odinga, talking about the need to end the street protests. And now what is happening is a talk around how can the two sides of the divide sit down and address all the issues that are raising contention right now. And I want us to look at the best approach to having this sort of dialogue. And I want to introduce you to the panel that will be helping me unpack that this morning. Sitting on my far right, we are having this morning Marcus Agenga. He is the Senior Programs Officer at the Elections Observation Group. If you like, you can call it ELOG. Thank you. We also have in studio Diana Gishengo, the National Coordinator, the Institute for Social Accountability. If you like, call it TISA. Thank you for creating time. And we also have this morning a legal mind, legal expert, Titus Makano. Titus, asante for creating time.
Thank you, and good morning.
All right, so maybe let me begin by just getting your quick thoughts. When you had President William Ruto speak on Sunday, addressing the media, and later on we saw the opposition leader Raila Odinga also coming out and sort of issuing a statement that was sort of like a reaction to what the president has just spoken about. What came to your mind just seeing the two gentlemen address the nation and what they said on that day? Let me begin with you, Diana. Having come from a background where it was turning into something else every Monday and Thursday now, the tension in the country was building up. We saw a lot of tear gas being lobbed in different parts of the country, concerns about the injuries, the destruction of property, the loss of life that was reported. Hearing that on Sunday, what came to your mind?
I think thank you very much. The truth that we saw on Sunday, for me, I was relieved that, look, Monday, we are not going to be looking out for what roads to run away from. This time around, we are going to, we will not be discussing how many more casualties we have. So the sense of calm, for me, was something that was a huge relief. But immediately after that relief, I had so many questions because the statements that were made by the president and Honorable Raila Odinga were too surface level. Very, very deep issues had been raised before the demonstrations, during the demonstration around the state of the nation. And as the two leaders made their statements to Kenyans, all you could do is say, look, we are moving into calm and peace. Maybe, finally, we can have very, very genuine conversations about accountability. But what accountability? That was not clear from the get-go. None of them projected the confidence that we are moving to resolving the issues. Whether it is the cost of living, electoral justice, nothing communicated confidence or people who are coming very willing to resolve the issues. It was just a truth. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Unfortunately, just to borrow from what you've said, and Marcus, I'd like to rope in on this, is that, of course, there is calm in the country, but we are yet to see solutions to some of the issues that were raised by the opposition, and also the government has also its position on how it wants things done. So sort of like we have not gotten the solution yet. Does it concern you?
Yeah, I think it is important to underscore what Diana said about the need for some sort of a ceasefire And we saw that on Sunday. And I think you've already said it, that before the ceasefire, the country witnessed certain upheavals, some of which led to deaths and property lost, and generally chaos in the country. I think the events of yesterday, for me, are more concerning. That the Right Honourable Raila Amolo Odinga appears to issue what we didn't know. He said that, this is what we agreed. This is what our negotiators spoke about, that we did not know about it on Sunday. So it seems to me that in his address on Sunday, the president underlined the need for a parliamentary bipartisan process to address the issues that the coalition, the Azimio team had indicated as major. But now Raila Amolo Odinga is saying that the bipartisan parliamentary process is not enough to address the issues, and therefore proposes a similar activity or a process like we had in 2008, the National Accord, which, of course, if you remember, was mediated by Kofi Annan. And so I don't know where this now leaves us. Honestly, I don't know where it leaves us, because then it seems like, of course, you had the president speaking about it in Rwanda yesterday. There's been a conversation. There's even a letter from UDA speaking that, why is this guy issuing fresh demands? So that's for me where I start. I'm sure even other Kenyans are now saying, where are we at right now? Because Raila is saying, in fact, he's actually saying, yes, I'm agreeing to the bipartisan parliamentary process, but it is not enough to address the issues that we have raised. But of course, he has raised other three issues apart from the talks, the cost of living, the election servers, a new IEBC in terms of reforms that are required, but also the Kenya Kwanzas to cease buying members of the opposition. So that leaves me as a Kenyan a little bit worried that this time round things may not be as rosy as they are or appear to be.
So this is really not a nice place to start, because we thought this journey ought to be taking us closer to getting a solution. But as an expert, if you say you're concerned about what culminated yesterday and leaving at the country at a point of not knowing what is likely to happen in the coming days, it's really concerning. Let me also get your input, Wakili, on this. Yesterday, President William Ruto was very categorical, sustaining his critics of, what he calls the Kenyan version of the handshake, that according to what he explained yesterday, sort of like having an arrangement between the government and the coalition. I'd just like to, speak specifically on the words he used to describe the Kenyan version of the handshake. He said it is undemocratic, unconstitutional, and illegal. You understand the history of the country and how it culminated to the handshake between the former president Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, and what President William Ruto could be using to borrow his criticism from. Tell us a bit about what the law says in a scenario such as this, and is a handshake anchored in law in any way, or is it illegal, like the president says?
Now, I wouldn't say that a truce between the opposition and the government is illegal per se, because remember, a government is informed by political events. And at times in the process of governance, political challenges arise, and you have to resolve political challenges through political means. For example, right now, there is a proposal by the Azimio that they want to reconstitute the IBC. From where we sit at the moment, the process of selecting the IBC commissioners through the select panel that we saw, I think, last month, and what happened in Parliament, that process has been concluded. And you can see the President has proposed that they need now a bipartisan process through the Parliament. Now, reversing that whole process, there is no law that regulates that process. In fact, parliamentary business, as far as reconstituting or selecting the IBC commissioners, is now functus official. But now how do you return it back? Through a political intervention. So Of course, the president has always held very strong views against merging the opposition and the government, because when that happened, when he was the deputy president, he was the first casualty. So, and I'm sure in his mind, he wouldn't want the same thing to happen to his deputy. And then later on, that could be catastrophic politically, because that's what he's looking at. Because at the end of the day, he's also a politician, and he's looking at 2027, because he's asking himself, if I allow myself to go down that road, it is highly likely that I may go down through the same channel that the former president went through. So from where I sit, since it's not anchored in the law, you cannot argue and say that it is mandatory, it is obligatory for the opposition and the government to work together. But at times, the government and the opposition, under special circumstances. You remember like the situation we had in 2007, 2008, when we came up with the National Accord. The opposition and the government at that time agreed that through the National Accord, and they went to Parliament, and they amended the Constitution and created the position of the Prime Minister. So it all depends on how the opposition and the government frame the issues and process it through the law in terms of passing legislations to allow infusion of such events into the law.
Mm-hmm. But then, is it only to fix a political problem? Because you've talked about even the game plan for the next general election, and this could be like sort of like President William Ruto's way of trying to avert any possible crisis. What then would inform where the balance comes? Because from what he said yesterday, a handshake was something that led us to a disastrous position as a country. He was very concerned about issues of accountability, issues of checks and balances. He was saying this is, and it would be undemocratic if it is done. I mean, is it not about the Mwananchi? It's just about the politicians and what they want to safeguard when we are having this handshake? For
now, I'll be very candid with you. It's about the interest of the politicians, because if it was about the Mwananchi, you saw. So
it's not about democracy.
From where I sit, it's about their interest. It's about their interest. Okay. And moving forward. And why do I say so? If it was about Mwananchi, when the demonstrations were called off, you remember there were a few people that tried to demonstrate on Monday. And you can't tell me that the moment the demonstrations were called off, the price of food went down, the price of fuel went down, and still people are incurring these expenses. But you can see the two players are the ones who are informing this process, in as much as they say they speak on behalf of the Mwananchi. But this is a political issue that needs to be resolved, because remember, it has gotten to a point where business is not being transacted in this city. Farm produces that are supposed to come into the city are not coming. Now, how does that taint the government of the day? The government of the day has been pushed to a corner where it is impossible for it to deliver. Now, if the government of the day fails to deliver, what are the impacts or what are the repercussions as we move towards 2027? The president will be asked, you were pushed to a corner where you are unable to contain the opposition. So they have to come up with solutions to solve these problems. In as much as there are issues that concern Mwananchi, cost of living, the prices of fuel, but I would say those are incidental. The main issue here is to take care of the political interests of these bigwigs. That's why you see they are proposing a bipartisan process to solve the issue. The process will happen in Parliament. And you can see the former Prime Minister, after looking at the proposal that was placed by the President, 2-3 days later, he's now saying we want a multi-sectoral process which will infuse other people. To me, that's an afterthought, because remember, he has said that emissaries from two camps have been discussing on the truce. So which means both of them have been placing their demands on the table and they have been talking. So for the former Prime Minister to come now and say that they want to broaden the spectrum of the talks akin to that we witnessed in 2007 that was led by Kofi Annan, I think there is an afterthought. They've sat down and they've realized when we go the bipartisan way, through Parliament, we will not succeed because most of our parliamentarians have crossed the floor.
I'm looking for the place of Mwananchi in this conversation. Let me come to you, Diana, hoping I'll find it. I mean, if you sieve through the issues on the table and even the discussions going on in the country right now, do you find anything that touches the common man, or is it a political problem attracting political solutions like what Wakili is suggesting? It's all about them and what they want and their plan.
Currently, and unfortunately, it is largely about the political class. And immediately they say handshake, bipartisan. It speaks to the two of them, to the two interests, and to the exclusion of all other interests that exist in this country, that have always existed, and that are very, very important at this particular moment. But let me speak more to why I do not support the bipartisan process in Parliament, because the political problem we have cannot find a solution at that level. And before all this, I think as members of civil society, we've been speaking to several issues that need political dialogue. The last government that was there, and during the campaign period, there was all this talk about capture. State capture, political capture of institution. And to be honest, for us, Wananchi, it was not clear who is capturing, who is captured, okay? It wasn't clear. We went into campaign using that particular narrative. Then immediately after the election, look at a number of things that initiated this particular process. The Honorable Raila Odinga says, we still contest the elections. With that particular contestation, it goes to speak to the confidence of the judiciary. Thereafter, you have conversation by the ODPP saying, look, all those headlines and pressers I issued around the war on graft, somebody had a gun on my head. I am now withdrawing all those cases. We've heard from other actors, controller of budget, very, very critical institutions, even as we say, let us now go the route of the rule of law and strengthen, rely on institution. All that has not been addressed anywhere. When this parliament was constituted, and during the elections of the speaker and a number of rulings around who was the majority and the minority, there was a ruling that was not widely accepted, made by the Speaker of the National Assembly, that saw UDA become the majority party, okay? Whereas there were other discussions around whether is it Azimio, One Coalition, or Kenya Kwanza. So that's the parliament you're going into. And even the discussions around the selection of IEBC was largely, the problem is because all the critical institutions, they are disagreements. It's not clear, do we trust them anymore? We can say the two people, it's just the two of them, but unfortunately, they control, each of them controls half of this country. So when they speak, they are able to mobilize half of the country on one side and the other half on the other side. So when it gets to that level, and a parliament that has a majority and a minority side, is there and very deep political interest, there is no likelihood that we will get any progress at that level. We are likely to sink back to where we were, where citizens' needs of high cost of living were taken to the streets to serve political interest. But remember, those are still very, very pertinent issues. How do we resolve the cost of living? We must address our budget. We must address our debt burden. Services are not being provided. Kabianga has gone on strike. Why? Because there is no help. There is no money. comrades have no way of surviving anymore. And it's not just that particular universities, it's universities across. This is something that can go the bipartisan way and all members of parliament address it. Why are they not addressing it? The tax issues, tax incentives, they have been politicized in a way that it is unlikely we will get a sober debate. I was in a meeting with members of parliament around the issue of pending bills, something that Treasury and other institutions ought to resolve very easily. On the members of parliament from both sides said, we will need political direction on this particular issue. So I think there is definitely need for a higher dialogue that should even be moderated by people who are not political actors, but one that factors the political interest. But has the environment for it been created? Not yet.
All right. So that's why we're here to talk about the proposal to have a multi-sectoral approach of doing this, or a bipartisan, which will be the best way to address the issues on the table. But let me come to you, Marcus. There is always this, it seems like Kenyans are dancing to the same tune. If you look at the history of elections in this country, it's always soon after the presidential election results are announced, it's like we are going back to the same point as a country, and sort of like history is repeating itself, if you ask me. And the bone of contention, one of the key issues has always been the IEBC. Right now, it is among the, on the top priority issues fronted by the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance. I'm just wondering, why is this issue critical, the IEBC matter, and will we ever find a lasting solution to the divide that it usually creates every post-election? Because it's sort of like a hot potato that keeps taking us steps behind as a country. Right now, it's sort of like everything we achieved in the previous elections is gone. We are starting all over again. Why is this important?
Thank you very much. I think just before I come to that, let me just respond to the question you asked about the entry point. The one you're asking, Diana, about the entry point. I think if the country were to choose this bipartisan approach, then the entry point would be public participation. And as she has rightly put it, both sides in the House have, I mean, these are representatives. I mean, because we know that sovereignty belongs to the people. They exercise it either directly or indirectly through the ones that they elect represent them. So the entry point would be through public participation. So if this parliamentary process were to commence, I'm sure they'll be calling a number of stakeholders, including the members of the public, to give their view. So that perhaps could be an entry point. But back to the question you've asked, that do we, we seem to be having the similar issues in, year out. It seems to me that that is actually the case, and maybe we are not learning from our past mistakes. I was reflecting last night about the 4 agenda. If you looked at the national accord, it had 4 important agenda. The first agenda was the immediate action to stop the violence that was there, and that was addressed. We had the second agenda was immediate measures that were supposed to be taken to address humanitarian crisis. And that, I mean, if you remember, we had many IDPs and other guys who had lost property and lives. And of course, and then, of course, the third one was, enforcing political, bringing down the political crisis. Now, these first 3 agenda were addressed. But then there is a 4th agenda that most guys appear to have lost after the reviews that were done and new offices created. The one that was addressing long-term and deep and permanent issues that the country had faced, especially those that required constitutional, institutional, legal, and policy reforms, especially land reforms, the issue to do with poverty levels and employment issues. I mean, they seem to be ringing the same bell today. So whatever approach, Dana says she prefers the multi-sectoral approach, which person also agree to. But then we have this documented. I think we know what ails the country, both the Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, which was part of the accord that time. The president himself was part of the discussions at the accord. If you remember the Serena talks, Martha Karua herself was part of the discussion. So she's very familiar with the national accord and the issues identified. So if we're to be very genuine, honestly, I would think that at the center stage, because if you look at the fourth agenda, that remained largely unaddressed. Very serious constitutional issues, serious institutional reforms, land reforms, issues to do with poverty and unemployment, inclusion and cohesion. We suffer greatly because of unresolved issues and Agenda 4. So whatever form, Diana, that we take, I think we need to bring to light the fourth agenda. It should dominate the discussions, whether if the country chooses and sticks by the bipartisan parliamentary approach, Agenda 4 should be captured. If we go the other way that Raila is talking about, which then invites a multi-sectoral approach, then the Agenda 4 must also be addressed, because and it should be Agenda 1. I think for me, we make Agenda 4 in the National Accord Agenda 1.
But right now, the conversation seems to be dominated by the outcome of the just concluded elections. It's about opening the server, and according to the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya, they say that this is something that is non-negotiable. They say auditing the 2022 election server is necessary and urgent. Yeah. There's also that very strong demand to have reforms at the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Yeah. It's not the first time we're hearing this narrative. Why is IEBC such a bone of contention? Why is it such a hot potato? I just want to understand why we don't seem to be getting away from this subject. Let me hear your thoughts, Wakili, on this.
Yeah, I think it's very simple. The IEBC has always been at the controversy of these issues of elections, because most of the times, we have permitted the politicians, through parliamentary initiatives and through political channels, to always influence how the commissioners are eventually appointed. You remember in 1997, we had the IPPG, and then the IPPG, which comprised, of course, members from both divides of members of the both political divides, to try and agree on a model that they will feel that all of them have been included. Later on, again, they disagreed. So the issue has always been that we have allowed politicians to control the process. And once they control the process, they will definitely want to have an influence on those ones that are sitting in the IBC. You can see the complaints that are there right now by Azimio is that Kenya Kwanza has been able to buy off some of the MPs that belonged to their faction. And now when these issues come before the House for debate, they don't have numbers. So the agenda that Kenya Kwanza has will sail through because they have beat them in terms of numbers. And the process has gone all that way to the conclusion. And right now they are contesting that it is not fair. It is unfair because they did not have numbers. So the solution perhaps lies to a situation whereby we as Kenyans will come up with a model that tries to completely dissociate this process from the politicians, so that we try and infuse a picture that is clearly devoid of an influence from the politicians. But otherwise, if we continue allowing politicians to control the process, these whimpers will never end, because at the end of it all, they're the ones who participate in elections. And ordinarily, when someone wins, they will always be happy with the referee. When someone loses, they will always lay all manner of allegations against the referee. The referee was not able to see these fouls here and there. And this is exactly what we are experiencing. So if we can remove this process from the control of politicians, I think we will be moving towards the right direction.
All right. But is the environment conducive for that, especially with the culture of mistrust that we seem to be having as a country? We'll pick up this conversation in just a bit. Allow me to take a very short break right here on Daybreak. We are talking about the ongoing talks to have a bipartisan dialogue between President William Ruto's team and also Raila Odinga's team. And and which way is the best way forward for the country. Do share with us your thoughts and insights at Citizen TV Kenya, at Safin_Ching, at Ayub Abdikadir. We will be sampling some of them as we continue with this broadcast. For now, we take that break. Don't go too far.